3. Hey everybody, it's the CC and JT Amateur Hour, Production Values Coach Today. Sitting over there is CC.
And over there is JT.
And it's day 21 of the BAT. No, it's not really. Not really.
Well, it is because we're winding down.
The big ass trip ended yesterday. 20 days of frolicking, hilarity, adventure.
Driving.
7,560 miles of driving.
Fun.
And we'll come to that figure, that 7,560 miles, from the moment that we left our driveway to the moment we ended back our driveway. So,
yep.
So we are tired.
We are tired, yes. But
so
we thought we'd come on and do a little bit of a brain dump.
Bonus podcast
to, I don't know about JT, but I'm having a lot of thoughts now that we're sitting down and we haven't gotten in the car this morning, which, whoa, that's the first time we haven't done that for almost 3 weeks.
3 weeks, yeah. We were getting into the car. So just to give a quick overview of what we were doing and why we were doing, we drove through America going east, and then we did a light hump over into Canada, Ontario. And then we continued that northern push up to Maine, and then we went to Maine down to Pennsylvania, then Pennsylvania over to Maryland, Delaware, and then we did a downward loop through Virginia and Kentucky and Tennessee,
mm-hmm.
And then we sort of pointed our way west. And when we were doing the numbers last night, in addition to the 7,500 miles that we did a state count of how many states we went through. And to our mutual, what
amazement.
The heck? Yeah, mutual what the heck. We ended up going through
25 states. So we did half of the country.
We did half the country. Now, I don't know if we did half the country by square mileage, but if you were to count the states.
Yes.
We did
25 states. And our biggest day, we did 7 states.
Right.
So
yeah, we were doing we did at least 2 states every day, but we ended up doing it's just boggling to think that we did 25 states over 20 days worth of driving.
And 1 Canadian province.
And 1 Canadian province. Oh, Canada.
Oh, Canada.
Oh, Canada. Anyway, so
we saw and did some fun things.
We did some fun things. We had a lot of fun, and it's doing all of this, trying to get this all in the brain, organized in the brain, is because it was just a continuous state of motion.
Yep.
We did take some breaks. We stayed 2 nights in Maine to do some background research for a book that I'm writing. We did 2 more nights in Gettysburg, again, for the same book. And then we did 2 nights I almost said Freeport. Delmar, Salisbury, that area there in
Maryland,
Delaware, to visit with my sister. But other than that, we got up, we packed, we hit the road, and we drove 300, 400, 500 miles in that day, depending on destinations.
Yes.
Get to the hotel room, unpack, same routine, because, basically CC had a routine down of packing and unpacking. And that's not to say I didn't do my part.
No.
I did do my part.
Mm-hmm.
But by doing this routine, we only had one very small missed thing.
Yes.
Very small missed thing, which is not even important. But when you consider how many nights we were on the road and how far we traveled and everything, have only one teeny tiny little thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because of your very excellent routine, it says a lot. So thank you.
You're welcome.
That was great.
Well, and you had a part in the routine also, because, for example, in the mornings as I was packing things up, and you made the comment that I packed in reverse of how I unpacked, basically the same steps. But the point of that was to make sure that we didn't leave anything behind, especially our prescriptions and very important things. Everything else we could replace. But while I was doing that, you would be off getting the luggage cart, and then
we had a routine.
We definitely had a routine. So both of us worked into that routine in the mornings and the evenings, and we had most of our breakfasts at the hotel.
Yeah.
So that was pretty easy. We would get up, go downstairs, do that, pack up, and get in the car and go. We did a couple of local breakfast. We did one local breakfast. Did we do anything other than the Waffle House?
We did the Waffle House on Mother's Day.
Yes.
We did the Waffle House on Mother's Day.
That was interesting.
That was a great. That was.
Talk about America. It was
yeah,
very Americana.
Yeah, Americana. So, just there's just so much that we want to talk about this trip, and there's just so much to say, and I don't know where even to begin. Do we talk about, for instance, Eureka, where we left one of my books? Yeah,
We should definitely talk about that because that was the first time
yeah,
you've put one of your books out in the wild. There was a little free library there. It had like 2 books in it. I remember one of them was by Brandon Sanderson.
yeah,
I don't remember the other one, but if anybody happens to be in the Eureka, Nevada area,
yeah.
please let us know if you find JT's book. It would be A Sheriff in Nevada, autographed by JT. It has information about our website, so if any of you happen to find it out there in the wild, we'd love to know.
Yeah, and or do we talk about our somber walking through Gettysburg through the museum and seeing the video, which caused you to.
I cried so, and that was like the start of the day. We go in, we get our ticket to the museum, and the cyclorama.
Yeah, the cyclorama's fantastic.
Is amazing. But then the first thing we do is we go see this movie, and by the end of the movie, I'm just like,
Yeah, Morgan Freeman.
cannot
of
stop
course,
crying.
Morgan Freeman can narrate any of my books. But it talks about and then we go through through the park.
Yeah.
Or do we talk about the Maritime Museum, which is
that was amazing.
which is just down the street from the Bath Ironworks.
Yes.
Yeah.
And your grandfather's house.
And the grandfather's. Or do we talk about this? Do we talk about that? Do we talk about
We
Devil's
did a
Tower?
lot. Oh, Devil's Tower was
Devil's
cool.
Tower. Do we talk about these things? So let's take a step back and let's talk about just general overall perceptions and from what we learned from America. And I'm going to go with something, and we got to be careful because generalizations always lead to stereotypes, and
Yes.
they're both wrong. But generalizations and stereotypes. But we were dealing with a lot of imaginary lines drawn in the ground. I mentioned that in a blog post. But the 2 lines that I didn't mention were time zones, which we are still getting used to, because we went through all the time zones there and all the time zones coming back. So right now, it's 7-ish as we do this podcast, 7-ish in the morning. But yesterday was 8 o'clock. And the day before, was it the day before or the day before that?
Something like that. I think it was the day before. It was like 9 o'clock. And
yeah, so it's...
when we were in Maine, it was 10 o'clock.
Yeah, and so we were just, and we spent most of the trip in the Eastern time zone because of the way that the trip was, engineered. We were in New York, Maine, and then we spent...
New Jersey.
Jersey. I'm not going to say what I usually say when I say here, Jersey. But we spent a lot of that time on the eastern side and then, coming back. So our bodies are still, it's like wake up at 5 o'clock this morning Pacific time and I'm wide awake. And so it's good. But the generalization I want to just touch on about the imaginary lines other than time zones is the Continental Divide. And the fact that, and we went through the Continental Divide, of course, going east and coming back. Actually, it kind of squiggles, and so it was funny. Like I think in South Dakota, we went through it across it like 3 times.
Might have been Wyoming.
Might have been Wyoming. Yeah, Wyoming would actually make more sense.
Like
Wyoming because we were doing northern trek.
Yep.
But one thing I've noticed, and for folks that don't know, the Continental Divide is supposed to be the line where waters flow to the east versus waters flow to the west.
Yes.
That's the theory of the Continental Divide, and for the Continental Divide to the east of it, which is really the majority of the country, pretty much east of the Rockies.
Yep.
Just anything that didn't have a town had a farm. If it didn't have a town, it was a farm or a ranch or had something to do with farming.
Or a body of water.
But just, I don't think Americans, I shouldn't say it that way, but I did not have a grasp of how much farming and ranching there is. Mm-hmm. And so when you think about the states that we went through, Minnesota, Wisconsin, New York, Maryland, Kentucky, Kansas, obviously, Missouri.
Eastern Colorado surprised me.
Yeah, Eastern Colorado, just so much farming and ranching.
And giant windmills.
Oh yeah, giant windmills.
So many giant windmills.
So yeah, just when you go to the west of the Continental Divide, you don't see that much farming. You don't see that much. It exists, and it exists in a fair number, but proportionally, There are far fewer urban areas west of the Continental Divide than there are east of it.
Yeah,
And I know I'm speaking generalities because I'm not including California in this. California is its own beast.
definitely.
California, with its farming and ranching is sort of like, a snapshot of what happens to the east of the Continental Divide, but just so much.
Actually, that's a good way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
California is like a microcosm of the whole country.
Yeah.
Because it has so many different climate areas.
Yeah.
The Central Valley is heavily into farming and ranching, not as much as it used to be. I know at least the almond orchards are being taken out quite a bit because they're so water hungry, and there are issues with water in California. Whereas to the east of the Continental Divide, water everywhere.
Water, it's amazing.
Everywhere.
Amazing amount of water and amazing amount of ranching and amazing amount of farm. And of course, we did go through those intense urban areas.
Yes.
Our favorite was Flint, Michigan. We love Flint, Michigan. We don't love Flint, Michigan. But that's not the only urban areas. We drove through some really fascinating urban areas. But that was my general impression of America. Just far more farming and ranching than I could ever imagine. What would you say is your general American, I don't want to say culture shock, but what did you not expect that you saw? And you were saying that more than a few times. I did not expect this. But what do you think?
That's pretty much
big picture stuff.
Big picture overall, we have all probably seen in movies, TV shows, et cetera, various, high profile parts of the United States, things like Washington, D.C., which we didn't do this time, but New York City, those types of places. But for example, Cooperstown, New York, it was not anything like I expected. Gettysburg was not anything like I expected.
Okay, so what did you expect? And then
So-
what did you find?
What I expected was what I had seen in media. What I found was that,
I'm sorry, and what did you see in media?
well, in media, I expected everything to be much bigger and more expansive because that's what we're used to here in the West. You go out and there's like big expanses of nothing. So when we went to the Baseball Hall of Fame, it was actually a lot more enclosed than I expected. We went to the battlefields at Gettysburg. They were a lot more enclosed than I expected.
Okay, so you're talking about the towns.
Yes,
the towns surrounding those areas.
Yes, so I was expecting a lot more expanse, but once you get east of the Continental Divide, aside from the farming communities, the layout of the towns and the sites that we visited were not anything like what I expected because I was basing them on my Western perspective, and my background is that I've spent most of my life in the West. Even though we did live in Nebraska for a few years, we were in Iowa, places like that. I'd been to Wyoming before, but going any further east than, for example, we did a trip to Chicago, but anything east of that was totally unexpected for me because I'd heard about, densely populated areas and you can go through these many places, but until you experience it, you don't really understand it. And I'm sure the same must be true for people who live on the East Coast who've never experienced the Western U.S. So it's, my generality was that I expected the entire country to be more like where I'm from, whereas it wasn't.
So a good example of that, a good local example of that is all these developments that are coming in, and that they're all, these big houses, these 3, 4, 5 bedroom houses on teeny tiny parcels of land, which to us is, having been raised in the West, you spread out, you just sort of make room. There's elbow room, but when you go back east and you see just people living on top of each other, close
with
together.
No fences.
Pardon me?
With no fences.
With no fences.
That was one of the things that we noticed because out in our part of the country, fences are very common. There's a lot of livestock. So people want to keep things contained with their in their own
and it gets
area.
into in the urban areas,
Yep.
and of course there's a stupid cliche: good fences make good neighbors.
Right.
But when you get on the other side of the Continental Divide, and further east you go, especially in New England.
Yes. Then you have a lot of people living next door to each other without fences. And your sister is a good example of that. Her piece of property is actually in front of another piece of property where there is no, well, I guess they have a small fence between them because she has dogs.
Yeah, she has.
But outside of that little area, it's not fenced in.
Yeah,
so,
she has to keep the dogs in.
Yeah.
So.
But it's very different mentality, I guess,
Right.
because everybody is used to that. And we have a family member who was from New England who talked about how strange it was out here, and it didn't really sink in for me until we actually experienced it, that it is very different.
Yeah. And so it's, especially around my sister's area, which is in the Delmar Salisbury area, which is the Delaware Maryland state line. That area there is all just it's kind of a snapshot of what you were saying, because
Right.
it's a farming community,
Mm-hmm.
and then when you go into Salisbury, it becomes very compact.
Yep.
Old houses, very
Mm-hmm.
small houses, all very together. And then when you get into Delmar, you get into the 20th century, 21st century of big long roads, and the fast food alley
Yes.
and Walmart and that area there. That's where, and the car salesman alley there.
Right.
But consistently no fences.
No. And a couple areas in particular, you mentioned Del Mar, but that whole area, there's a peninsula there that they actually call Delmarva. So it's Delaware, Maryland, Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
Going down into the Virginia section of that peninsula, what I knew of Virginia growing up was watching the Waltons.
Right.
That area of Virginia is very different from what they portray in the Waltons, which I believe was filmed in Southern California anyway. But the point being that, what you see in a movie or a TV show or something is really not always representative of reality.
Yeah.
Even though that show was supposedly based on reality. We went through North Carolina and randomly came across like Pilot Mountain, which was based, Andy Griffith's show, I believe, was Mount Pilot. There was a community. We didn't expect it. It just kind of appeared out of nowhere.
Which
Mount
is pretty
Airy,
much the
Mount
story
Pilot.
was trips in some instances.
Right. We stumbled across a lot of things we didn't expect, but it's not, we have preconceived notions about places. Until we've gone there, we have to be careful, like you said, about stereotyping things, because it may not be what we expect.
One other thing I want to touch on just briefly is how much investment that America has put into its transportation system. It's just especially recently, of course. We always talk about what is infrastructure week, which became a running joke during the previous administration. But there is a lot of infrastructure work being done. But that aside, the amount of bridges and the complexity of bridges and tunnels and the freeways and the interchanges, where there's multiple stacked roads and everything like that.
The engineering.
Where the America loves cars.
Yes.
It's just amazing how much of cars. And so when you hear people complain about there's no public transit system for much of America. Well, folks, that's on purpose, because there is just millions of miles, not millions, but, we traveled 7,500 miles of those roads. And so we have a fair good idea of, like the very complex bridges, the very deep tunnels, so people can drive at 50, 60, 70, 80 miles an hour over long distances at times.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a reason why America is so invested in the automobile, and the reason it's so invested in its roads is because America is just very car oriented. I mean, just drive on Interstate 80 from the west to east, east to west, and count how many semis there are transporting goods from the west to the east. And it's just, well, here's an example. We did the license plate game.
Yes.
We did the license plate game as a means to keep aware, keep interest in our surroundings about us, and also to, basically because
help pass the time.
Yeah, we're nerds. And we ended up with 48 out of the 50 states.
Right.
We ended up with 48 out of the 50 states. We didn't get Hawaii.
Right.
And I can't remember the other one we didn't
I
get.
feel like it was Alabama or something.
Something like that. So we got...
But we did manage to get, we saw a Mexican.
Yeah, we saw
several Canadian
several
provinces.
Canadians. But the point being is we got like half of that the first day.
Right.
We got
just
half
in
of that.
Nevada.
Just in Nevada, from
Yep.
driving from Carson City, going up to I-80, and then going from I-80 to Salt Lake City. We just in that period, we got like 20-something plates.
Right.
Just in that period of time, and then we gathered the rest up, and that's again an indication. Well, first of all, Interstate 80 is, just vital.
Yeah.
completely
It's
vital from Northern California to, points east.
kind of a lifeline of the country,
Yeah.
I think. But you mentioned that, and one of the things I noticed, especially as we were heading homeward, is that I could tell we were going in the right direction because we would see a bunch of plates around us for the state we were in. But as we started working our way east, we would start to see a lot of the plates for the next state over, where people maybe had gone shopping or something in one state and they were headed home, or they were going for a weekend or something.
Yeah.
So you could always tell there would be a high concentration of the state we were in. Then you would start seeing the next state over's plates before you actually cross the state line.
So we saw things. We
saw many things.
3 weeks ago, we were so much younger.
Well, you did the coast to coast trip last year.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, today is the 1 year anniversary of the start of that. I did that 1 year ago, starting today.
And to put that in perspective, a year ago we had just gotten back from France.
Yeah.
So we had done an overseas trip, which got a little complicated. We got home, and you decided, I was still working at the time. You'd already retired, and you decided to go ahead and go back and visit your sister because I couldn't get away at the time because I'd just come back from vacation.
Yeah, and that was today that started a year ago today, and I did it by myself. God, that was the stupidest thing ever. But just did Interstate 80 and just straight, and then came back. Interstate 80 didn't take all the way, of course. I think I did some of 90 and some 70. But the way that going back to my earlier point, the roads and the freeways, the Eisenhower Interstate Highway System, or whatever it's called, is designed for that. Is designed for that, it's a marvel of engineering. It really is. It's a marvel of engineering that we just take for granted, that I don't think people really think much about. But we certainly sampled a lot of the big three, 70, 80, and 90, and all of those their little connectors, the 3-digit connectors. And then, of course, we did U.S. highways 40 and 50. We started on 50, we ended on 50.
And we saw the opposite end of 50, which is in Ocean City, Maryland, where we normally see there is a sign in Sacramento, California. And I found out that there is a story behind the signs on both ends, but it tells you that Ocean City, Maryland is over 3,000 miles away, whereas in Maryland, there's a sign that we did not see that said Sacramento is over 3,000. I think it's 3,073 miles on both ends, which is apparently not correct. But
anyway.
So that was something that we've been seeing for years, being local to this area and having done Highway 50 quite a few times. So it was very interesting to see the opposite end of Highway 50.
Yeah, it was okay. So I can't think. There's just so much we want to talk about, so much we want to say. But since this is a writers' podcast, we should we should work our way back to the writers' thing, because that was the reason for doing that. Is getting the boots on the ground to sort of learning and seeing America, so we have a better idea of what we write about in the future, because we both have plans to do historical fiction in our respective areas. Me in the East Coast, the Upper East Coast, and you in the Central.
Well, mine is going to have backstory in probably the Midwest, but it will be more Western. And I was looking more of, where the person started and what they perceived this area to be once they got here.
Yeah. And I think we'll close out this podcast with just a very quick story, which is a very quick story about the value of doing this, writers getting out there and doing it. Because, well, first of all, let's just let's just say an uncomfortable fact. Writers don't have a humongous budget for travel. It just doesn't happen. So I know I've done it. I've done it frequently to use Google Maps to get a view of the area. And for one book, I used a hotel in Green River, Colorado.
I think it was Utah.
Yes, Green River, Utah. Well, that's something else we could talk about. We'll do it another time. It's how often the same names appear in many, many different places. Because I'm pretty sure I saw another Green River.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So Green River, Utah. So I did an important scene in Green River, Utah. I used Google Maps, clicked around, said, oh, that's very pretty. Okay, that's all that. And so I used some scenes for that. And then the hotel. Well, we get to Green River, Utah, and we see the hotel. And right behind the hotel is this big, humongous mesa just gorgeous mesa, and I did not see in Google Maps, and I'm kicking myself because I could have used that as a symbol or some sort of allegory or something, metaphor, simile, all these technical phrases that for my book, and I just missed that opportunity. Gosh darn shucks.
And that's part of the thing. Like you said, we want to get this background so that we can include these little tidbits into our writing. And that way, if you don't have the chance, if you can't afford to go back east, then hopefully some of what we learned back there, that didn't occur to us before, we may be able to share.
Mm-hmm.
And that way we teach you something along the way that, or maybe it will give you the chance to go back and experience it for yourself someday. Like, oh, that sounded cool. I need to go there.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up because we are still, we have things to do. Boy, we sort of suspended our life locally for 3 weeks, obviously, because we weren't here. So we got some things we got to catch up on in life and things.
But we did have a very kind former coworker of mine watch our house. So thank you, Natasha.
And we did have a next door neighbor help us out. So thank you, Carla.
It takes a community.
It takes a community, and we're grateful to people for helping us out. Anything else? Just on the tip of your tongue that you want to say in this podcast that you don't think you got to say?
Just that we will be organizing our thoughts about this trip a little bit more, and a book should be coming out of it. A little bit of a travelogue, at least in my mind. We haven't determined how we're doing it, but hopefully we'll be able to give you some helpful hints. We'll tell you a little bit about the fun places we visited. And just basically kind of a rundown of how we did this trip, why we did this trip, and what came out of it. Because that's what we do. We write. So that's
and my final thought is, as we sit here, is always the question. Now, if you knew then what you know now, would we have done something so silly? And it's like, I'm so tired.
Well, you did it twice.
Yeah. So
2 years in a row.
I don't have an excuse.
I would say that aside from if we'd had a little bit more time and a little bit more money, maybe I would have liked to spend a little bit more time in certain places to get more of the feeling, because it was very interesting to be there. But there also came the point, at least at the halfway mark, and I'm sure you were feeling the same way, where it's like, I want to go home.
I want to go home.
I want to go home. I love home.
Yeah. Anyway, I hopefully that you found this interesting. Hopefully you can dig through our website and find other podcasts that'll help writers write, because that's what we like to do. Our website continues to be www.carsonhume.com. And we have all sorts of plans, and we will be podcasting again this weekend when we wake up a little bit and we get a little more organized here.
When our brain cell isn't quite so tired.
Our brain cell is so tired. Anyway, so y'all take care. Sitting over there, Cece.
And over there's JT.
We hope that you have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now. Bye.